Jimin whispered something to Jungkook off mic. Jungkook's tears said it all. You were never meant to know. The whisper sliced through the noise like a scalpel, soft, surgical, and devastating. The roar of the stadium dimmed to a distant hum in Jungkook's ears as Jimin leaned in, his breath warm against his cheek. There was no microphone to catch it, no fan cam close enough to lip read it. Just 7 words, quietly detonated in the shell of his ear, leaving devastation in their wake. Jungkook blinked once, then twice, and the tears came, slow and silent, as he smiled through them for the cameras. Behind the dazzling chaos of fireworks and final bows, there was something else, something broken, something secret. The kind of silence that only follows betrayal. Backstage was a blur of congratulations, slaps on the back, and distant cheers, but Jungkook moved like a ghost through it all. The synthetic scent of stage fog still clung to his jacket, mingling with the faint citrus of Jimin's cologne, haunting him. He locked himself in the dressing room, bracing both hands on the counter, staring at the reflection of a man who had just been unmade by a whisper. Jimin didn't follow. Not right away. The air in the room was cold, recycled. The fluorescence above hummed like an electrical warning, flickering slightly as if struggling to hold the light steady. Jungkook removed his in-ears with trembling fingers, the rubber tips slick with sweat. The mirror refused to lie, eyes red-rimmed, cheeks glistening. But the pain, sharp, surgical, was somewhere deeper. Somewhere Jimin had reached with terrifying precision. He had thought he knew him. Jimin, the playful one, the protector, the one who always lingered beside him after rehearsals to laugh or to listen. But what he had whispered was something darker, something final, like the twist of a key in a locked door that would never open again. Jungkook remembered the rehearsals that week. The way Jimin had been quieter than usual, eyes shadowed even beneath studio lights. The way he had lingered alone at the piano after everyone else had left. And the phone call Jungkook had overheard, Jimin's voice low and trembling. He can't ever find out, not from me. Now it all made sense. A knock at the door, not tentative, not urgent. 3 taps measured familiar Jimin. Jungkook didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. Jimin stepped inside, his expression unreadable. No mask now, no idol, just Jimin bare, burdened. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it like a man anchoring himself from drifting away. You're not going to ask me what I said, he asked quietly. Jungkook laughed, a bitter sound that held no joy. Why would I? You already answered everything. Jimin's eyes softened, the pain inside them no less vivid than Jungkook's. I didn't mean to. But you did. Jungkook turned to face him fully. You chose to, you knew what it would do to me. Silence, heavy like velvet, draped over the room. Jimin moved closer, each step deliberate, like walking through memories he could never change. It was never supposed to be like this. Then why? Jungkook's voice cracked like ice underfoot. Because if you had known, Jimin said, voice trembling, you would have never stepped on that stage again. Jungkook stared at him, heart hammering. You think that was your choice to make? I think it was mine to protect you, Jimin replied, and there it was, that old instinct. The same one that had made him shield Jungkook from rumors, from burnouts, from cruel whispers in the industry. But this time it wasn't protection. It was betrayal disguised as love. Jungkook turned back to the mirror. It's too late now. Jimin stood still, caught between confession and collapse. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, Jungkook whispered, as a single tear fell and met his trembling smile in the mirror. The truth lingered in the room like smoke, impossible to contain, impossible to ignore. Behind them, the crowd was still chanting their names, unaware that a fracture had formed offstage, silent, seismic. Irreversible. What else have you hidden from me, Jimin? Jungkook's voice echoed sharply off the narrow hallway walls, cold, lined with old posters and forgotten trophies. It wasn't just a question. It was a blade, a demand. Jimin hesitated, halfway down the corridor, back turned. His shoulders were stiff, fists clenched at his sides. You think you're ready for that answer? He asked without looking back. I deserve the answer. Jungkook's steps were fast, angry, until they were face to face under the flickering exit sign, breaths ragged, chests heaving. You whispered something that tore my world apart and then walked away like it was nothing. Jimin's jaw tensed. It wasn't nothing. Then what was it? A warning, a goodbye. Jimin's eyes finally met his, wet, furious, full of 1,000 unspoken things. It was the only truth I still had left to give you. And then he turned and stormed down the hall. Jungkook followed. You're not going to run from this. Jimin whirled around. I didn't run from you. I've never run from you. Then tell me what the hell is going on, Jungkook hissed. Because right now, I feel like I've been performing next to a stranger. They stood at an impasse, rage and heartbreak pulsing between them like static electricity. And then, without another word, Jimin pulled a lanyard from his back pocket, an old keycard, faded and cracked. Follow me, he said, voice low and cold. He led Jungkook to a restricted area at the end of the basement level, a place most of the team didn't even know existed anymore. The label used to store archival footage, old practice tapes, fan letters from a decade ago, things long buried. The card beeped, the door opened. A gust of musty air hit them. It smelled like dust, forgotten memories, and something metallic, like secrets rusting over time. Jungkook stepped in first. The lights flickered to life, revealing shelves lined with labeled boxes, tape reels, and drawers of documents. But Jimin ignored all of it and headed straight to a locked cabinet in the far corner. He punched in a code, 4726. Jungkook noted it instantly, his birthday. The drawer clicked open. Jimin pulled out a single manila envelope, thick and worn. Inside were photographs, letters, and a small external hard drive. He handed it to Jungkook. These are the things we weren't supposed to keep, Jimin said. Things the company erased, things they didn't want us to see again. Jungkook opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The first photo made his blood run cold. It was them years ago in a practice room, but someone else was in the photo too. A girl, no, a trainee. He remembered her vaguely, soft voice, always in the background. She was my sister, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook blinked. What? She was in the trainee program, for 2 years. They dropped her without warning, said she didn't have the image, said she wasn't worth the risk. Jimin's voice was thick with something sharp and old. A month later, she tried to take her own life. Silence fell like an avalanche. She survived, Jimin said. Barely, but she lost everything. And I was told by our management to keep quiet, to never mention her name, not even to you. Jungkook shook his head in disbelief. And you did. You obeyed them. Jimin stepped forward, voice breaking. I was 19, Jungkook. I didn't know what else to do. They threatened to pull me from debut. They said I'd lose everything. And I couldn't risk it. I was scared. You should have told me, Jungkook said, fury cracking through him. All this time, and you let me live in ignorance, perform like nothing had ever been sacrificed. I told you on stage because I couldn't carry it anymore, Jimin said. I wanted you to know that our success, it wasn't clean. It was built on silence, and people we left behind. Jungkook staggered back a step, the weight of it crashing down. All those years you smiled through it all, the interviews, the award shows, while your sister. She lives in Busan now, under a different name. She watches our videos in secret. Tears burned Jungkook's eyes. How could they do that to her? They do it to all of us, Jimin said bitterly. But she was my family, and I let them. Jungkook sat down hard on a storage trunk, clutching the envelope to his chest. Why now? He whispered. Why tell me now? Because I knew if I didn't, I'd never be able to look you in the eye again. I'd rather have you hate me than keep pretending. Jungkook looked up at him, eyes bloodshot, heart bleeding. I don't hate you, Jimin, he said, but I don't know if I can forgive you. Jimin nodded, as if he expected nothing less. That's fair, he said, but if you ever want the whole truth, it's all on that hard drive. He turned and walked away. The archive door slammed shut behind him, echoing through the room. Jungkook was left alone with the envelope, the drive, and a truth so heavy, it threatened to crush him. And in that cold, silent room, surrounded by the ghosts of their past, he realized something even more terrifying. This was only the beginning. Play it. Jungkook's voice was hollow as he sat alone in the studio's dim control room, bathed in the bluish glow of the monitor. His fingers hovered over the mouse, the hard drive now plugged in. The silence screamed louder than any crowd ever had. Outside the glass, the practice room was dark, empty like the ghost of a stage. He clicked. The first file was labeled, Training Footage March 2015, Confidential. The video flickered to life. Grainy, CCTV angle. Trainees lined up like soldiers, sweat-drenched, exhausted. Among them the girl Jimin's sister, her eyes sunken, her body trembling. She was singing, off-pitch from fatigue when a voice off-camera barked. "She's useless, get her out." She collapsed mid-note. A man's voice, cold and clinical, spoke again. "Jimin can't know. Cut her now before she ruins him." Jungkook's knuckles turned white around the armrest. His heart pounded so loudly, he barely heard the next words. "Erase the footage. We'll tell the press she left for personal reasons." He closed the file, opened another. Internal memo, Park Hana blacklist notice. Black letters, cold language. Subject, Park Hana is to be indefinitely suspended from any company-affiliated programs, contracts, or sponsorships. Any staff who communicate with her will face contract termination. This decision is final. Then there was a voice memo. He hesitated, then clicked. Jimin's voice, years younger, panicked and full of tears. "You can't do this. She didn't do anything wrong. She's better than half the people here." Another voice, deep, ruthless. "This is bigger than her, and if you ever want a career, you'll shut your mouth." Click. Silence again. Jungkook sat there for what felt like hours. Memories rushed back, Jimin's unexplained disappearances, his long silences during that year, the dead look in his eyes that Jungkook had once dismissed as exhaustion. No, it had been grief. And complicity. The door burst open. Taehyung. "Hyung, what the hell? Going on? Jimin's gone. He just vanished." Jungkook blinked, jolted back to the present. Gone. He left the dorm, left his phone. Jin Hyung said he found a note. "What kind of note?" Jungkook's voice cracked. Taehyung pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. In Jimin's handwriting. "I'm tired of being their weapon. I'm tired of being yours. I'm going to see her. Don't follow me." Jungkook stood so fast the chair tipped over. "We need to find him." "Where would he go?" "Busan." Taehyung froze. "You think he's—" "He's going to her, to finally break the silence." Outside, the rain had started, harsh, relentless. It beat down like a countdown, each drop slicing through the night. They drove. No staff, no GPS, no security. Just two friends in a car, chasing down someone who had unraveled the seams of everything they thought they knew. Hours passed. Jungkook stared out the window, fists clenched, mind spinning. The footage haunted him. "He carried that pain for years," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "And I never noticed." Taehyung didn't respond for a long moment. Then, "Maybe you didn't want to." The silence between them was like a wound. Jungkook swallowed. "I think I loved him too much to see the cracks." "He loved you enough to keep them hidden." Taehyung's words landed like a stone in his chest. They reached the coast by sunrise. The air smelled of salt and memory. Jungkook stepped out, his breath catching in the chill. The small apartment Jimin had once mentioned in passing, his sisters, stood across the street. Curtains drawn, no signs of life. He walked to the door. Knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. The door creaked open. Jimin stood there. Eyes swollen, hair damp. His face looked older than it had yesterday, like he had aged a decade overnight. Inside, his sister sat on the couch, staring at Jungkook with eyes identical to Jimin's. Only hers were guarded, weary. You shouldn't have come, Jimin said. I had to, Jungkook replied. Because if you jump now, I'm not letting you fall alone. I'm not going to jump, Jimin said, almost smiling. I already fell years ago. Jungkook stepped in, faced Hana. I'm sorry, he said, voice thick. For everything, for not seeing, for not knowing. Hana didn't speak. She looked at her brother. He told me you were the only one who ever made him feel like he wasn't just part of the product, she said quietly. That you were real, honest. I thought I was, Jungkook whispered. Then be real now, Hana said. Help us end this. Jimin looked away. We're leaking the footage, he said. All of it. Jungkook's heart stopped. They'll destroy you. They already did. No, Jungkook said firmly. Not without me. If you go down, I go with you. Jimin's eyes glistened. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. And for the first time in days, the silence between them didn't hurt. It healed. But somewhere far away, in the sleek offices of the label's headquarters, red lights were blinking. The system had detected a breach. And someone had just opened the archive files without authorization. They were watching, listening, and they weren't going to stay quiet. Do you know what you've just done? Namjoon's voice thundered through the quiet cafe, eyes sharp as knives, as he slammed his phone down on the table. The headlines on the screen bled in red. Leaked, hidden archive exposes trainee abuse, blacklist scandal, Jimin and Jungkook at the center. Across from him, Jungkook didn't flinch. His coffee sat untouched, going cold. I know exactly what I did, he said, his voice low, and I'd do it again. Jimin sat beside him, pale but steady, hands clasped together beneath the table to hide their shaking. It wasn't a mistake, Taehyung. It was necessary. You went against the label, Namjoon hissed. Against every contract, every non-disclosure, every protection we've ever been given. Protection from what? Jimin snapped. From the truth, from justice. The company made us, Namjoon growled. They built the world that worships us. They built it on broken people and silenced voices, Jungkook cut in. I won't be part of it anymore. The cafe's back room was empty, soundproofed. Jin had rented it out in haste after the leak went viral overnight. News outlets were swarming the building. Fans were crying. Reporters were clawing for a quote. And the label, silent for now. Yoongi stood by the door, arms crossed, unreadable. They're going to sue you, maybe worse. You know that, right? Let them, Jimin whispered. At least now they'll have to answer to more than just their lawyers. Taehyung burst through the side door, breathless. They've pulled all our content from the main platform. Our music's being scrubbed. What? Jungkook shot up. Everything, Taehyung panted. Even solo work, it's like they're trying to erase you both. A heavy silence fell over the room. Jungkook stared down at his hands that had signed autographs, held microphones, lifted trophies. Now they were stained with rebellion. They're scared, Jin said finally. That's why they're doing this. They want to make you an example. Good, Jimin said. Let them try. Jungkook's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. One line. If you want to keep her safe, stop now. His blood froze. He showed the screen to Jimin. Jimin's expression darkened like a storm rolling in. They're threatening Hana. Jin grabbed the phone. We can trace this. We'll go to the police. No, Jungkook stood. We do this our way. Namjoon stepped in front of him. Your way is reckless. No, our way is honest, Jungkook shot back. You can stay silent if you want, but I won't. Outside, the storm of media swirled. Cameras, protesters, supporters, and enemies. They slipped out the back. Later that night, Hana's apartment was dark, too dark. Jimin called her. No answer. They ran up the stairs two at a time. Jungkook pounded on the door. Hana, it's us. No response. He tried the knob, unlocked. The door creaked open. Lights off, curtains drawn, silence. They stepped inside. The living room was trashed, papers scattered. A shattered photo frame on the floor, a blood-red message spray-painted on the wall above the couch. Tell no more. Jimin dropped to his knees, heart in his throat. Hana. A whimper. From the bedroom. They rushed in. Hana sat curled in the corner, shaking, her lip bleeding. Her eyes were wide, wild with fear. They were here, she whispered. They knew everything. They warned me. Jimin fell beside her, pulling her close. I'm here, you're safe now. Jungkook's hands trembled as he called Jin. We need a safe house, now. The next 48 hours moved like fire. Fast, chaotic, out of control. More footage leaked. Anonymous insiders came forward. Former staff. Former trainees. A whistleblower from within the executive branch. Each revelation cut deeper into the label's pristine image. Fanbases split in two. Hashtags trended hourly. Protect Jimin and Jungkook. Justice for Hana. Expose the system. Disband the lie. But the backlash was brutal. Jimin received death threats. Jungkook's family home was vandalized. Every idol from their company was silenced. No statements, no appearances. Then came the public statement. The label finally responded. The footage was manipulated. The claims are false. We have launched legal action against Park Jimin and Jeon Jungkook for breach of contract, defamation, and incitement of unrest. The world held its breath. Jungkook stared at the press release, jaw clenched. So that's how they want to play it. They're not going to stop, Jimin said. Even now, even with everything exposed. But we're not stopping either, Jungkook replied. We're taking them to court. Silence. Then Jin said, then we better prepare to lose everything. And Jungkook smiled, a smile carved from fire and pain. Then let's make sure it's worth it. I need to testify. Jimin's voice was calm, but his eyes were a hurricane barely contained behind lashes. He stood in the middle of the safe house's dimly lit kitchen, the counter cluttered with cold tea and untouched food. Jungkook, seated at the table, froze mid-scroll on his phone. No, Jungkook said instantly. Absolutely not. You've already given them enough ammo. This isn't about ammo, Jimin replied, stepping closer. It's about truth. If I don't stand in that courtroom and say it out loud, then everything we've done is just noise. Jungkook slammed his phone down. They tried to kill the truth, Jimin. They broke into your sister's apartment, painted threats on her wall, and you still think standing in front of a judge will make them play fair. I'm not doing this because I think they'll play fair, Jimin said, his voice shaking now. I'm doing this because I need to know I did everything I could before they destroy us. A silence stretched between them, tight and sharp, like a string pulled taut. Then a voice from the hallway, Hana. Let him speak. They both turned. She stood there, bruises faded but eyes steel strong. She looked at Jungkook. He's right. If he doesn't tell them what happened, they'll bury the rest of it. You think you've leaked everything? You haven't. I remember more. I remember who else was there. Jungkook exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. This is suicide. No, Hana said. This is survival, maybe for the first time. Jungkook looked at Jimin again and saw something he hadn't before, not guilt, not fear, resolve. Then I'm going with you, he said. They arrived at the courthouse through a back entrance, flanked by silent supporters and 2 private guards hired by Jin. The media storm outside could be heard even behind the thick walls, shouts, flashes, cries of betrayal and belief. Inside, the room was colder. The company had hired one of the most ruthless legal teams in the country. Their lead counsel, a woman named Choi Yura, stood poised like a viper, every syllable sharpened to slit throats. Park Jimin, she began, her voice smooth as silk and just as suffocating. You claim to be a victim. But would you say your career benefited from staying silent about your sister's fate? The courtroom murmured. Jimin stared at her. I wouldn't call this a benefit. But you stayed silent, for years, until now. Why? Because I was afraid, Jimin said plainly. Afraid of them, of what they'd do to me, What they'd do to her, I was a teenager. They used fear as currency. Choi arched an eyebrow. And yet, you accepted the fame, the awards, the wealth. You capitalized on the silence. I survived in it, Jimin replied, his voice now tightening. There's a difference. And the footage, she asked. How do we know it wasn't doctored? Because I lived it, Jimin said. Because I watched my sister unravel while I smiled on stage. Jungkook watched from the witness bench, fists clenched. Then it was his turn. Jungkook, Choi said coolly. You were not present for most of the events in question. Why involve yourself now? Because I believed him, Jungkook said. Because I watched the truth in his eyes. Because I saw what it cost him to carry it. Choi stepped forward. Or perhaps this is just a publicity stunt to break your contract and gain independence. A new solo start. Jungkook laughed bitterly. Do I look like I'm winning? The judge called for a recess. Outside the courtroom, chaos bloomed. Fans holding signs, protesters screaming, security barely holding the line. Inside a private room, the team huddled. They're going to try and flip it, Namjoon said. Make it about betrayal, make it about ego. Let them, Jungkook said. The fans aren't blind. They just need one moment, Jimin added. One moment that makes them feel it. Then Hana stood. Give them mine. They all turned to her. I remember the night they cut me, she said. I remember what was said, who said it, what room I was in. If they need proof, give them me. Jimin's face drained of color. No, you've been through enough. No, she snapped. I'm done hiding. The next morning, she took the stand. The room was silent as death. She told them everything. The manipulation, the isolation, the threats, the forced exit. And then the voice memo. A recording, never released until now. A secret one, taken during her final evaluation. The voice of an executive. Jimin's image is too valuable. She's a liability. Make her disappear. The court erupted. The judge banged his gavel. But the damage was done. The trial continued for days, every hour peeling back another layer of the illusion. And with every truth revealed, the public turned. The silence had been broken, and the world could never go back. But as the judge called for closing statements, and the room held its collective breath, Jungkook looked at Jimin, who sat upright, shoulders square, a fire in his eyes. And he knew. The war had only just begun. You're trending in 43 countries, Taehyung said without looking up from his phone. His tone was flat, hollow. 43. Jimin stood by the window of the safe house, arms crossed tightly against his chest. Outside, the moon was sinking behind the skyline, casting everything in a shade of blue that felt too calm for how violently his heart was beating. I don't care about trends, Jimin said, his voice raw. I care about who's next. Behind him, Jungkook leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the television muted on the wall. Another panel, another expert, another talking head dissecting their every move like a crime scene. Do you think they'll do it? He asked. Do you think they'll burn it all down to protect themselves? Namjoon, seated at the dining table surrounded by folders and printouts, didn't hesitate. They already are. On the screen, images flashed, blurred faces of former trainees stepping forward anonymously. A black screen showing stock prices plummeting. Fans chanting in the streets. A former vocal coach arrested for obstruction of justice. The label was bleeding. But it wasn't dying, not yet. The courtroom had been adjourned for a week, pending investigation into the audio recordings. The judge had ordered a forensic review, which meant the next hearing would be the moment everything either crumbled or collapsed. Jimin hadn't slept. Neither had Jungkook. Then the message came. A single text. From a burner number. Check your email. You're not the only ones who kept receipts. Jungkook opened his laptop, hands stiff, shoulders tense. Within seconds, his inbox loaded. There it was. An anonymous email. No subject. Inside, a video attachment. They played it. A hidden camera, A boardroom. 7 executives seated around a conference table. One of them, the CEO, leaned forward. Park Jimin's sister is a loose end, he said. If she breathes a word, we destroy her. Another exec, and Jungkook. He'll fold. He always folds. He just doesn't know he's our puppet. Jimin's face turned to stone. Play it again. They did. Again and again. Until the rage in the room was loud enough to make the walls shake. We leak this, Jungkook said. Today. No, Namjoon interrupted. We bring it to the courtroom first. Let the law do what it's supposed to. Jin stood, and if the law does. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Then he said, then we burn it all ourselves. The next morning, as the media descended again, the safe house was breached. A shadow moved past the back door at 5:43 a.m. By 5:46, Hana's scream rang out through the halls. Jungkook and Jimin ran to her room. Broken glass. A phone, hers, shattered on the floor. A knife buried into the wall above her bed, blade glinting with a red ribbon tied to the handle. Tied with it, a note. Last chance. Hana was unharmed physically, but she couldn't stop shaking. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly together. I'm not safe, she whispered. You're not safe. Then we stop playing safe, Jimin said, grabbing the knife and hurling it across the room. It clattered like thunder against the hardwood. They didn't wait another hour. That day, in front of hundreds of reporters, the team held a live press conference. Cameras lined the street. People screamed their names, some in love, some in anger. Jungkook stepped forward first, facing the microphone. His hands were steady. I was silent for too long, he began. I trusted a system that asked me to sing while others suffered. I've learned now that silence is complicity, and I will never be silent again. Then Jimin stepped up. He didn't speak at first. He looked out over the sea of faces, some crying, some frowning, some stunned, and took a deep breath. My name is Park Jimin, he said. I was groomed to be grateful for my success, no matter what it cost others. But I am not grateful for silence. I am not grateful for fear, and I am not ashamed to stand beside my sister. The crowd erupted. Some in cheers, others in shouts. One reporter broke through the barricade. Do you think you've ruined your legacy? Jimin stared her down. No, I think I've finally earned it. Then they dropped the final bomb. They released the boardroom video. Live. Unedited. Every word. Every threat. The reaction was nuclear. By nightfall, 2 executives had resigned. One had fled the country. Anonymous employees flooded the internet with internal messages, emails, receipts. The company's shiny facade melted under the weight of its own rot. But there was one more shock left. Jungkook's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A voice on the other end, shaky, familiar. I want to talk, it said. You don't know me, but I was there in 2015. I saw everything, and I have the proof, but I need protection. Jungkook's blood ran cold. Who are you? I was the one who signed the termination papers on Hana. They made me, but I never destroyed the footage. I kept it, all of it. He turned to Jimin. There's more. Jimin's eyes widened. How much more? Jungkook's voice was a whisper. Everything. The old studio was scheduled for demolition. A forgotten building tucked behind the glittering towers of Seoul, where it had all begun. The place where dreams had been forged and broken in equal measure. Now it was quiet. Dust clung to the mirrors. Tape peeled from the corners of the floor. Faint echoes of laughter, music, and muffled sobs still seemed to haunt the walls. And it was here the final piece was hidden. The whistleblower, Min Deho, former assistant manager turned invisible, met them in the early hours before dawn. He looked gaunt, his hair thinner, eyes darting at every sound. He clutched a hard drive as if it were the last piece of his soul. They made me sign a silence clause, he whispered, as if the walls could still hear him. But I kept backups. I couldn't delete her, not her. Jimin reached out slowly, his hands trembling. Deho handed it over. Inside are full records, audits, internal emails, video evidence. The kind that will make prosecution impossible to avoid. They'll have to shut down. Jungkook didn't speak. He only nodded, his jaw tight, his pulse a drumbeat in his throat. "We'll protect you," Jimin said, "no matter what comes next." Deho gave a hollow laugh. "Protection? You've exposed something too big to protect anymore. I just want to stop being afraid." And then he left. They stood there, in the silence of their youth's grave, holding the final nail in the coffin of the empire that raised and used them. 3 days later, the courtroom was packed beyond legal capacity. The final session, the last chance. Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side, flanked by their legal team, Hana behind them, calm and composed. Her scars were invisible now, but they radiated through her like quiet strength. The prosecution presented the hard drive. Footage played. The boardroom meeting was only the beginning. They saw secret training evaluations, with handwritten notes marking trainees for emotional instability after being pushed to collapse. They saw Hana's final performance, raw, beautiful, filled with cracks not of weakness, but of exhaustion. They saw the executive who clicked delete with a smile. They saw a system that had demanded loyalty while weaponizing silence. And then, for the first time, the judge looked down, not with skepticism or rehearsed impartiality, but with something heavier. Shame. When the verdict was read, the room didn't erupt. There was only silence. The company was found guilty of suppression of evidence, defamation, coercion, and abuse of minors under protection laws. Key executives were arrested. The label's board resigned en masse. All pending activities under its name were suspended indefinitely. No celebration followed, no cheers. Just tears. Tears from Jimin, silent and shaking as he covered his face in his hands. Tears from Jungkook, as he reached over and pulled him into an embrace that said, "We did it, and we survived and we're free." And from Hana, who stood up, walked past the cameras, and hugged her brother for the first time in public. For once, there were no secrets between them. The world watched. Some fans wept, others turned away. The industry scrambled to recover. But something had cracked permanently. An awakening. Later, much later, Jimin stood on a quiet stage, not an arena, not a broadcast, but a small benefit show where cameras were optional and the spotlight was soft. He looked over at Jungkook, who nodded once, gently, before taking his seat at the piano. And Jimin began to sing. Not for fame, not for forgiveness, but for truth. For every voice that had been silenced. For every name erased. And though his voice trembled, it soared. Because this time, no one could take it from him. When the final note faded, the room stood still. Not in awe of a star, but in reverence for a survivor. And in that moment, no legacy mattered more than the one they had reclaimed, with blood, with pain, and with unwavering love. It was over. And just beginning.